Tonight, 8 years in prison. The former Anglican Dean of Newcastle jailed for sexually assaulting a child. Good evening, I'm Juanita Phillips. This is ABC News. He's one of the most senior Anglican clergymen in Australia, convicted of child sex abuse. And today, Graham Lawrence learnt his fate.
Graham Lawrence walked to Newcastle Court, where his freedom was about to come to an end. Do you have any remorse at all for your crimes? In July, Lawrence was found guilty of the 1991 rape of a 15-year-old boy who he lured into his living quarters at Newcastle's Christchurch Cathedral after a youth band concert. Lawrence also took steps to ensure his victim's silence. As Mr Jiggins fled the assault, Lawrence told him not to tell anyone about what had just happened. He said, "You're just a boy, I'm the Dean, no one will believe you."
No longer should we say Graham Lawrence OAM Order of Australian Medal, when in fact the reality is he's now Graham Lawrence CP, convicted paedophile.
Our reporter Vukovic has more from Newcastle.
Since his conviction in July, Graham Lawrence has been banned by the Anglican Church from attending any church services. And today, after the sentencing, Newcastle Bishop Peter Stewart also had this message for other survivors.
The community does not accept what occurred to him, and neither do we as the Anglican Church in the Diocese of Newcastle.
Now 77 years old, Graham Lawrence also had his age and a number of medical conditions taken into account to give him a lower non-parole period of 4 years and 6 months. His Honour, Judge Tim Gardelman, also considered him a low reoffending risk and provided him with an early release date of April 2024.
Events are fluid this afternoon. A fire is burning at Watch and Act level at Whittingham near a petrol station northwest of Newcastle. Our reporter Dom Vukovic joins us from there now. Dom, what is the situation there at the moment?
Well, Kirsten and Gemma, that fire has recently been downgraded to an advice. The fire was the first Watch and Act to go up today in the Upper Hunter region. It was right near a petrol station, so there was obviously a lot of grave concern about that. It was burning out of control. It's now been contained. But what we've been told now is that about 16 kilometres south on the New England Highway, there's another fire that's sprung up at North Rothbury at Wine Country Drive, and a short time ago that was escalated to an emergency level. And as I mentioned before, that wind gust from the northwest is really kicking in. That started about 10:30 a.m. this morning, and I think that's what got everybody on their toes. Very fluid situation. As you can see behind me, you can hear the fire trucks now heading down from that Whittingham fire. As I mentioned, we're here now on the New England Highway at the intersection of the Golden Highway. There's been a road closure behind me. You may see that there's traffic slowly being let through, but they're not allowed to go up the New England Highway because of the Whittingham fire still being out of control. But a lot of units now heading to provide backup for that North Rothbury fire, which is about 16 kilometres south from us. That's north of Newcastle.
Tonight, the bushfire emergency comes to Sydney. Water bombing aircraft called to the North Shore as more than a dozen emergency warnings are issued.
We simply can't rest easy at this stage. We've got many hours left yet of prevailing hot, dry, windy conditions.
Good evening, I'm Juanita Phillips. This is ABC News. Homes damaged in fires burning across the state. Communities under threat. We have reporters covering the major fire grounds from Sydney all the way up the coast to near the Queensland border. In the Hunter Valley, residents say they had barely any warning as a fast-moving grass fire leapt into the trees and headed towards homes at North Rothbury near Cessnock. Firefighters saved the town, but before they'd even drawn breath, a new fire sparked up the road.
There was no mistaking the urgency as reinforcements were rushed to Rothbury, where a fast-burning grass fire was racing towards homes.
It was pretty scary. It come roaring through that bush pretty quick.
Firefighters scrambled as roofs caught alight and backyard spot fires broke out.
Within what seemed like seconds, it went from a small fire to crowning above the trees.
In the end, a row of homes were left scorched but still standing. Behind me you can see that these power poles which caught alight are now being put out. They're the only thing that was between that fire front and these homes.
We had just took off in panic, and all these amazing fire people saved my house.
breathing a sigh of relief after a fast and furious scare. Dom Vukovic, ABC News, Rothbury.
And Dom Vukovic joins us now from Rothbury. Dom, residents who fled earlier today have started returning. What's been their reaction?
Well, Juanita, there's been a real sense of relief and gratitude. Residents, like you said, have just begun now trickling back to their homes. We spoke to one mother of two who was one of the first to return, and she began to cry. She was very emotional. She said on the drive back here she expected not to find her home standing, and that's because, as we heard before, this fire caught many residents by surprise. They were left scrambling, and many left with nothing but their phones, their keys, their wallets and their cars. So they were expecting the worst. Now, returning here, there's also a sense of gratitude. They're so grateful for what firefighters have done. Just a few metres to the left of me, we had the flames crowning at about 20 metres into the sky, burnt power poles, and that's what was facing residents when they were leaving. So a lot of gratitude, and residents breathing a sigh of relief here at North Rothbury tonight.
A search has resumed for 5 people who are missing after a helicopter crash near Port Stephens, north of Sydney. Reporter Dominic Vukovic joins us now. And Dom, there have been some strong surf conditions there today. How has that been affecting the search effort?
That's right, Miriam. Well, it has indeed hampered the effort. It is now a recovery operation. What we've been told is from earlier this morning, the police water boat, the Nemesis, was joined by Polair and a fixed-wing aeroplane scouring a 150 nautical mile area south of Fingal Point, where this helicopter is believed to have plummeted into the ocean on Friday night. They're also, of course, searching for the 5 people missing and feared dead that were on board, 4 men and 1 woman. Now, we've been able to identify one of the victims as Gregory Miller. The Australian Defence Force has confirmed that Warrant Officer Gregory Miller was on board that flight. And we also understand that David Kerr, the pilot, and also Jamie Ogden, a passenger, are also on that flight as well. So police and rescue teams hoping that these windy and heavy surf conditions will somewhat ease perhaps slightly this evening. They're now currently looking for this aircraft. They say it is probably semi-buoyant and possibly visible from the air as well, and they're obviously hoping to recover the bodies of these victims as well.
Robotic exoskeletons might seem like something out of a science fiction movie, but the bionic technology is now being used to help people with severe spinal injuries take their first steps.
Growing up on the beaches of Newcastle, Jess Collins spent her life competing in surf lifesaving events and was already a club champion. But on holiday last year, she paddled into what seemed like a perfect wave, and her life changed forever.
I've hit the board and then I've hit the sandbank and instantly didn't have any movement or feeling in my body, and I wasn't sure where I was placed within the water. I was face down, which was horrific.
Paralysed from the chest down, Jess is now taking part in a clinical trial with a robotic exoskeleton named Helen. Initially, progress was slow.
Jess hadn't stood at all for a year, so it was a big thing for her body.
But after weeks of hard work came a breakthrough.
We were able to actually have a cuddle standing up for the first time. It was absolutely amazing.
Researchers are careful not to overstate the capabilities of their technology in its current form. They're hopeful that the data they get from these initial clinical trials will help in future robotic research.
Welcome back, Jess.
For now, her surf club has hung a board in her honour, in the hope that one day she'll be back on the waves. Dom Vukovic, ABC News, Newcastle.
The New South Wales coroner has found the death of an Aboriginal woman in custody could have been prevented if police called an ambulance earlier. Dom Vukovic reports from Newcastle.
Rebecca Ma was picked up by police while appearing intoxicated in the early hours of 19th July 2016. She was taken to Maitland Police Station at just before 1:30 a.m. and then found dead in her cell hours later.
If you take another Aboriginal person in custody and you don't want to ring an ambulance, ring me. I'll go sit in there and monitor their health.
Rebecca Ma died in a cell at Maitland in 2016, becoming the state's first Aboriginal death in custody in 16 years. Today's inquest findings are critical of how police acted in the lead-up to her death.
Family, friends and supporters of Rebecca Ma marched towards the Newcastle court with a single message. Miss Ma was picked up by officers in Cessnock for appearing intoxicated. Her death was found to be accidental, but the coroner criticised police. At the moment, police are required to contact the Aboriginal Legal Service when an Indigenous person is arrested. The coroner says this should also apply when people are in custody for being intoxicated, but are not actually under arrest. The coroner says what happened to Rebecca Ma should be used to improve training of police officers. Dom Vukovic, ABC News, Newcastle.